Okay, so we are live. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on your lunch break as you learn all about tips for effective writing. So for those of you who don't know me or are new to the group, my name is Katie Dodd, and I run the Dietitian Side Hustle Facebook group. So this is going to be a 15 to 20-minute training that'll give you some writing tips and some inspiration to up your writing game. So if you are watching this later, which I know, we're trying to hit lunchtime, but I know we all have busy schedules. So if you're watching this later, go ahead and comment replay so that we know you were here. And yeah, so join me in welcoming our trainer today, dietetic intern, Cole Theobald. Cole is a dietetic intern at Oregon Health Sciences University, and he's also a freelance writer who has completed a minor in writing as well as a certificate in scientific, technical, and professional communications during his undergraduate work at Oregon State University. He has dabbled in many kinds of writing, from journalism to magazine writing to technical writing and advertisement writing. And through his courses, he's also published food writing blogs through Buckteeth Magazine, as well as 1853, which is a Corvallis focused blog. And he's already written two amazing blogs for my own blog, The Geriatric Dietitian, and he's working on a third one now. So I'm really excited to have Cole here today to, teach you guys some information, hopefully leave you inspired. So go ahead and take it away, Cole.
Right, so I'm gonna start my screen share.
Okay.
Hopefully we can all see that. And I'm going to start the presentation. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Cole Theobald, and I am, as Katie said, currently a dietetic intern at Oregon Health and Science University in the combined Masters of Science and Dietetic Internship program. And I am also a freelance writer. Right now and for the next couple of days, I'm going to be working with Katie to produce more blog content for the Geriatric Dietitian, as well as put out this presentation on tips for effective writing. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Corvallis, Oregon, actually, and I completed my undergraduate degree at Oregon State University, so I didn't go very far. I had originally declared biohealth sciences as my major, but with the intention to go into pre-med or pre-pharm. And then as soon as I learned that dietetics was a thing, I was like, oh, wait, no, I want to do that. Luckily for me, OSU has a really strong dietetics program, and I was able to switch majors very early on without any difficulty at all. Over my time at OSU, I was working through core classes and took a fiction writing class, and I figured out that I really enjoyed it. And then I learned that the professor was teaching another class in the next term about food writing. And I was like, oh, perfect. I'm going to do that one too. And jumped at the chance to take the other class. And then over the next few years, I sort of learned that I was sort of good at it, and decided to declare a writing minor, as well as the certificate that Katie mentioned in scientific, technical, and professional communications, because it was essentially just one extra class, so I could slide another certificate in there. At that point, I would be trained generally to write anywhere, because the way that the minors were set up, you had to take a breadth of classes, and there weren't many classes on the same topic. Most of the writing that I have done will be shown in this presentation, actually. And through the work I've done in these courses, as Katie mentioned, I've published an article in Buckteeth Magazine, 1853 magazine, and now that I've been working with Katie in the Geriatric Dietitian. That's not to say that the unpublished work wasn't nearly as valuable. I've been able to explore so many different kinds of writing and sort of get an overview of all the different styles that exist. So let's get into it and talk about what effective writing really looks like. So to write effectively, you really just need to accomplish your own goal, whatever it might be. It might be that you want to change a reader's mind about something, or let them know about something happening in the future. You might have a certain deadline, or you might be writing for yourself at your own pace. Whatever those goals might be, if you aren't writing effectively, you can start to feel a little worn down because the goals aren't coming as fast as you want them to. The process of writing itself might feel longer, harder, or less fun than it usually does because you aren't writing as well as you want to or believe that you could. So my number one tip for effective writing is to do as little work as possible. This can be accomplished by eliminating guesswork and letting decisions be made for you whenever possible. I like to look at this as being broken into 3 big questions to build a framework of ideas, and that you should think about them before you even start thinking about putting pen to paper or hand to keyboard, I guess. So the 3 questions are, what are you trying to write? Who are you writing for? And why are you writing this piece in particular? Let's start off with, what are you trying to write? This will be a pretty easy question to answer. If you're sitting down to write an email, you know you're probably going to write an email. If you're trying to write a resume, you're probably going to write a resume. Different genres or styles of writing come with organizational guidelines that can give you a scaffolding to build off of. For example, this press release here on the left, it has a specific way that it's organized to let journalists know what they're looking at. So you can see the contact information up at the top here, for immediate release in all caps in the middle, and then a bolded title, the lead, and then paragraphs that start off with such specific details and then broaden out as like most important to the story, less important, less important. And that's what they call in journalism the inverted pyramid style. Emails and letters, as this one in the middle, have a pretty similar structure as well. You'll start with a salutation, you'll end with a sign off and a signature, and then you'll have paragraphs, usually an introduction paragraph, whatever you need to have happen, and then more explanation as the email progresses. And then even with something like a blog post, like this one from Geriatric Dietitian, even they'll have like nebulous structures. So because you can write a blog however you want it to, but you can even like start narrowing in or broadening out as you progress the story, as sort of like a view that goes in or a view that narrows down. And you can start like making that process easier, so you're not just writing from nothing, by making an outline, and that can help to sort of build your own framework essentially. So next you'll want to think about who you're writing for. Of course, with information technology as it is today, anybody can read anything. So like I could go to the library and pick up a textbook on theoretical physics and read it, but I won't like it because I'm not interested in theoretical physics. I'm not the ideal audience. The ideal audience would probably be a student learning theoretical physics or a professor looking to brush up. So when you write a piece of work, determining who that ideal audience is can give you direction with how you write, especially in regards to word choice, sentence structure and fluency, as well as voice. The top 2 pieces here are written for completely different ideal audiences. This one on the left is more for like a heady academic, like philosopher type of person. And you can see that in the way that it's written. There are longer, less common words like bipedalism or hominid that aren't necessarily defined, and they're just sort of thrown in there without any thought for how it might be read by someone who doesn't really know what that means. And also this, from bipedalism to the end, is 1 sentence. So it's a very long sentence with very many clauses that sort of build off of each other. Whereas this post on, or this article on the right, was written for an audience that isn't necessarily interested in, it's like a general public that isn't necessarily interested in science, and we want to hit like a 6th grade reading level. So the sentences are a lot shorter. They're not super complex in the way that they're grammatically structured. And microbiome, which is what the article is about, is defined in simple terms, so that everyone can have a baseline understanding and then jump forward through the article. The bottom 2 pieces are good examples of how audience can determine voice. So in this bottom one, it is a project proposal memo to a professor, but it could also be like a boss or a supervisor or something. And you can see in the little blurb of writing here that it's super dry. It's not very voice heavy because you want to maintain an air of like hyper professionalism essentially. And it's super curtly written. Like, I believe that it will be a fitting topic for this assignment as I am a nutrition major. It reads super dry because that's what the audience requires. Whereas this bottom right piece it's for the ideal audience is like a scientifically literate, interested audience flipping through a magazine where they might not have necessarily an interest in nutrition specifically. So you want to grab their attention as much as you can in the way that it's written. So I was able to play with different punctuation and grammar that added voice to the piece, such as like exclamation points here, ellipses to like draw out the suspense of the piece or something, and then parentheticals that are like sort of like I'm talking out the side of my mouth, like less successful siblings, you know. Both voices definitely have their time and place, and it's up to you to sort of decide which one goes where. And lastly, you want to ask, why are you writing this piece? It can be more tricky to figure this one out, but the concept of why you're writing can be broken into three major aspects. Are you trying to be informative? Are you trying to be persuasive? Or are you trying to be creative with your writing? If you can figure out which is which, you can sort of narrow in on the content style that you'll be writing throughout the piece. In the leftmost piece here, it's an advertisement for trying to persuade someone to try out an imaginary service for a houseplant delivery, like a subscription box called Mary Stems. And so the entire purpose of writing this article or this ad copy was to not only draw a reader to want to try it out, but to even look at the thing in the first place, because there's so many. You walk down Times Square, there's thousands of advertisements. What's going to make yours stand out, you know? So through the color, the repetition, and the way that it's structured, even like as an entire piece as a whole, the way that it's shaped helps to draw the reader's eye towards it and hopefully persuades them to want to try it out. The top right piece here is a creative work written from, it's like the story essentially was about a circus fire. So I was able to play with voice and sort of break the rules of grammar and punctuation if a little bit, to sort of give it, you know, more of that voicey quality to try and figure out how to write as someone else. It also allows for more creative writing in general, allows for more descriptive sensory language, and it can also like it's hard to describe, but it's like you can do things that you couldn't normally do in traditional writing, like informative writing, narrative writing, like a blog setting, where you can do things you normally couldn't. And then for this bottom right piece here, it was an informative piece about radioactive, or the radiotrophic, which means they eat radiation, fungi in the bottom of Chernobyl where the reactor exploded. So it goes through talking about all of these things, and then this paragraph specifically focuses on melanin, defining it, giving it context, and then explaining what it does in forms of conversion to usable energy. It also lists through scientific nomenclature for certain fungal species that have a lot of melanin, and you can see here it has citations because it's not like something you made up or something whatever. It's something that you need to give people the information to be able to trace it back. So here are a few more examples of styles of writing, like for informative, persuasive, and creative. But it should be noted that very, very little writing falls into just one category at a time. Like recipes might be largely informative in nature, but it can have creative aspects as like, are you going to say you're going to mix this? Are you going to say you're going to fold this? And that means something different, of course, but it is a creative choice that you're able to make. Additionally, like it's persuasive too, because what recipe doesn't want you to cook it, if that makes sense? Like the entire goal of putting out a recipe is to get someone to try it. And so you want to make it as persuasive as possible by making it sound as tasty and easy to make as possible. If you write an opinion piece, say, it's informative for sure, because you can add in information from like studies that can back up your argument, but it's also creative because it's persuading with language. And so the more interesting you can make that language sound, the more you might be able to persuade someone to your side. In a creative setting, like a novel, it's like incredibly creative. It's like nothing but a story, but it can still be informative. Like if you had like a, I don't know, like a ship novel where they're talking about boats and ships and stuff, it can inadvertently teach the reader what the difference between port and starboard are. Additionally, it can be persuasive because like if there's a moral at the end of the story, you're persuading someone to follow that moral. So after you've answered these 3 questions, you might want some regular tips, general tips to improve the process of writing itself. So first, it's always a good idea to practice using grammar and punctuation correctly and reviewing things like the rules of commas, colons, semicolons, hyphens, and all the other kinds of marks that you could come up in your work can be incredibly valuable. Additionally, paying attention to other grammar rules like tenses is important as well. And with grammar, discrepancies can take the reader out of a piece and sort of make them pause, especially if it's not a creative story where you're taking the liberty to make these changes. It can give them pause and sort of take them out of whatever they're reading and sort of break the reader's flow and make them less interested in what you have to say. Next, you want to try to vary your sentence structure and complexity if you're like able to do so with what you're writing. So like if you're writing for kids, you're not going to make a 5-line sentence, you know, but if all of your sentences are short and choppy, like 1-clause sentences, or if they're all 5-line long, they'll get really boring to read. They'll get really tiring to read. And if you blend the two together, it makes it more interesting for a reader because they don't really know what's coming next. And so they'll be more interested in reading further along to see how it reads. Additionally, if it's all one or the other, it doesn't feel as conversational because people don't usually talk like that, you know? So it can make it more natural to read as opposed to block, block, block. Lastly, you'll want to find your own voice and style and then adapt it to the situation that's needed. So if you don't write like yourself and you're trying to emulate someone else's writing, it can come off more stilted or awkward than you intend it to because you're not writing naturally, you know? That can take a reader out of the story just as much as the other slip-ups. After the writing process is over, it's always a good idea to go through and revise and edit. So editing a piece of work can take it from like, okay, to like pretty good, and then from good to great, and then even beyond that if you keep going and bring in other eyes and peer review and things like that. But revising and editing can be tough to do. Even the process of writing, you can break work into chunks and then take breaks when you need to, so that you don't feel defeated by not writing or writing too much that you don't want to do. If you feel that you have flow, it's certainly helpful. Flow is like when you feel like you're like in the zone and you're like, I'm going to keep writing because, oh yeah, I'm writing so good right now. But it's not necessary to the process of writing. It's just you have to take care of yourself first, because if you're not having fun while you're writing, it's harder to convince the reader of what you're trying to convince them of, whether it's informative, persuasive, or creative. It'll essentially result in worse writing, which means more work at the back end with editing and revisions, and overall less fun. And then after you've fully finished a piece, it can be a good idea to like step back for a few days and sort of clean the slate of what you know your work to be, and then come back to edit with fresh eyes so that you're not, it's like hard to do the things that you need to do to the writing to make it better if you're too close to it. So like one of my professors always used to say, you have to kill your darlings, which essentially means this sentence or this paragraph or this entire chunk of story might be really good. It might be your favorite part of it, but if it doesn't really mesh with the rest of what's written, it has to go. Which is unfortunate to say, but if it's making the overall package worse, no matter how well it is as its individual, it needs to be changed or gotten rid of. Fresh eyes after a few days wait can help you make those decisions more forcefully and more like assuredly in what you're choosing to do. Lastly, just before you're about to submit it or finish it completely, I recommend reading the piece out loud, or you can also, I don't do this as much, but you can read the sentences in reverse order. So like read a full sentence at the end and then go to the next sentence up and then the next sentence up all the way to the beginning. Both of those things are to catch like awkward phrasing within sentences individually. If you're just reading through something silently to yourself normally, your brain can kind of skim through and fill in gaps where there are, like fill in gaps in the writing where there need to be like the or a comma or something. So if you read the piece out loud, your brain has to individually look at every single word and make sure that those words are, you know, where they need to go. And so your ear catches the mistakes better than your brain can on its own. Reading the sentences in reverse order sort of does the same thing. It makes it so that that flow that the brain can do is broken up so that you have to individually look at every single sentence on its own as opposed to how they are as a whole. And then I guess my last piece of advice would just be to practice like a lot. Get your 1,000 hours into writing and you'll feel yourself start improving as you continue to follow the tips outlined in the guide. That is my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, so yeah, if you guys who are watching on Facebook Live, just go ahead and comment below if you guys do have any questions, and I will read them to Cole. I don't think he can see our comments right now, but I just want to share a couple things. Erica with Nutritious Living shared, wow, that's a good combo when you're talking about like your background and experience in your little certificate. Elizabeth shared, yes, work smarter, not harder. Katie shared, these are really great tips. And Elizabeth just shared, great job. Thanks for your tips. So thank you all for joining us as we're going over live. I have to say this was even really helpful for me being someone who's a writer. I think I took a lot away from this, Cole. I liked how you talked about the different types of writing, the informative, the persuasive, and the creative. And even myself, I'm thinking about when I'm writing a blog article, I'm like, how am I combining those? And what do I need to maybe lean into more? Mm-hmm. And even the piece where you talked about taking a break, that can be so important because I love blog writing, but there's days where I'm like, oh, I don't like this. And so that's a good idea of like, take a break, come back with fresh eyes. And ultimately, if you try to force through it, you're gonna have not so good writing. So it's ideal to take a break. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm not seeing any questions roll in. So if you guys think of questions for Cole later, I can get you connected with him. So feel free to drop them if you have any. But I just want to say thank you, Cole, for sharing this presentation today. I really appreciate it, and thank you all for watching. And yeah, hopefully this was inspirational. So get out there and up your writing game. Okay, bye guys.